Hi, you're listening to the Connect Your Health to Life coaching podcast. I'm your host, Seth Lusk. I am a self-image coach and empowerment coach with a decade-long background in working in the health, fitness, and nutrition industry. If you're anything like I was, or the way that my clients currently are, then you might be struggling with body image issues, self-image issues, or issues with confidence. You might be trying to figure out why you can't take the ideas that you have for living your healthiest and most fulfilling life and turn them into lifelong actions. So join me in this podcast as we dive in deep on topics of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. We're going to look from the perspective of an authentic and empowering mindset, and from self-awareness, self-love, and of course, how we can start taking authentic self-action towards living that healthy and fulfilling life that you know you're here to live. I'm going to bust through some of the illusions and myths that we've all been taught to believe along the way and offer you confidence and clarity. I'm so excited to have you on this journey with me. So the only question is, are you ready to find out how you can start living your most authentic and fulfilling life once and for all? Then let's get started, shall we? Hello everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. For those of you listening in for the first time, welcome. This week's episode it's powerful, my friends. We're going deep on a subject today that I know is going to be difficult for some people to grasp. For those of you who stick with me and really try here, this is going to blow your damn mind because it keeps blowing my mind over and over again every time I talk about it with a client or with a friend, or just, go over the topic in my own head and write about the possibilities and use the tools that I use surrounding this topic. This is an exciting episode. All of my episodes are exciting, but I would say that this one in particular, I have just been all week, I keep talking to the branding company that works with me on putting out my social media, and they're helping me put together some posts to promote the podcast and talk about the contents of the podcast. And so I have to give them ideas about the podcast and present to them my outline and everything a little bit ahead of time. And so I've been talking to the guy who kind of runs the team that's doing this with me, and all week I've been so I'm kind of over here blowing my own damn mind making this podcast right now. And as I'm recording this, I haven't, he will get a copy of this voice recording as soon as I'm finished recording. So he hasn't received it yet. And he's been sitting over there being like, oh my God, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, because the little bits and pieces of it that I've been giving him, he's like, I really want to hear about this topic. So, get on with it already, Seth, right? We're talking about remembering the future. And I know some of you are scratching your head at that title, and it could actually mean two different things. But what I'm actually talking about is thinking about our future and remembering it as if it already happened. Okay? So we're talking about time today. And stick with me here, because I know I'm going to lose some of you when I say this, but just stick with me, please. Time is an illusion. And I want to start off with two quotes from two very famous people. First one is Marina Abramovic, and she is a conceptual artist, and she does some amazing work. You guys should really check out her stuff. And she says, time only exists when we think about the past and the future. Time doesn't exist in the here and now. Think about that. Really think about it. Time only exists in our mind. It's not a thing that is actually happening. We only have time when in the here and now, the only moment that actually ever exists, when in that moment we choose to think of the past and the future, that is the only time that time exists. Blows your mind, right? Okay, so next famous quote, Albert Einstein. I know a lot more of you have probably heard of Albert Einstein rather than Marina Abramovic, but familiarize yourself with her. She's got some really incredible concepts, and the work that she does is really fascinating. So Albert Einstein says, people like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Time, in other words, is an illusion. I get goosebumps just thinking about that. So here's what I want to talk about today, my friends. You see, we practice this idea of remembering our past, and we practice this idea of imagining the future. And then we treat remembering and imagining like they are two totally separate and maybe even opposite things. But what I want to bring into question today is, why have we not considered how they are very much the same? And how using them in the order of remembering our past and imagining our future might not serve us as much as imagining our past to remember our future. And we're going to take this apart and talk about this today, because I know I've lost some of you here. Maybe some of you are sticking with me. If you are, that's cool. If you're not, that's also cool. We're going to dive into this, and just please, if you need to pause the episode and let your mind process this is a heavy episode. There's a lot of, I'm going to ask you to really think with me here. I'm going to ask you to get into your brain and blow your own mind several times in this podcast. So take your time with this. All right, I'm going to start off here with two definitions. The definition of remembering is to recall to the mind by an act of effort or of memory, to think of again, to retain in the memory, to keep in mind, to remain aware of, to have something come into the mind again. Okay, that's the definition of remembering. Now we're going to look at the definition of imagining. To form a mental image or concept of. To believe, to exist or be so. To suppose or assume. So what I want you all to notice about these two definitions is that in both of these definitions, we are having to bring something into our mind. We see the things that we remember as bringing facts to mind about things that have already happened. And we see imagining as being make-believe or telling a story. But see, here's the thing. In remembering, we use our imagination as well. We use the imagination a lot when we remember, believe it or not. When we recall things from the past and we call it remembering, it's really not that different from imagining. Remembering is actually only different from imagining in the fact that we bring this thing, this image, this story to our mind, and then we keep it there for an extended period of time. Or we recall it to the mind over and over and over with the goal to retain it in our brain. That's the only difference between remembering and imagining. And you see, we feel very comfortable with knowing that when we talk about the future, we're making it up, and that it's just a story. But when we talk about the past and remembering, we feel very uncomfortable with looking at the fact that we're also using the same amount of imagination. We're making it up. The reality is, we are making up a lot of what we remember from our past. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here later in the podcast. So here, when we're recalling information from the past, when we recall that story, we are using information that we have now to make that past story fit into our current paradigm of the world around us. And a paradigm is basically like a concept, a theory, how we view the world, basically. It's how we see things. That's your paradigm, okay? So all of us have a paradigm. Even our society kind of has its paradigm that we all buy into in our own way by making our individual paradigms fit into the societal paradigm. And then we talk about it like it is an actual thing, this story of our past. When we make it fit into our paradigm, we then talk about it like it's this actual thing. But here's this thing it's a bit mind-blowing when you think about it. The past does not exist. It doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. They're both just stories that we tell ourselves that exist in our mind. That's the only place where these things exist, is in our mind. It is not a physical thing that happens out there. If you take a picture from a year ago and look at it now, the picture exists. But the moment in the picture that was captured through the camera lens, it no longer exists. And you can tell yourself so many stories about what is going on in that picture. And a lot of times if multiple people are in the picture and they all, obviously have their collaborative memory together, they will tell very similar stories. But that story doesn't exist, only in the minds of the people telling it. And what we're going to look at today is how our brain actually fills in the blanks a lot in these stories. What exists when we talk about the past is simply a story you are telling yourself about what had existed at the time that the event took place. And remember, time is merely an illusion. It only exists in our heads, because the only time that really exists is right now. Right now as I'm saying this word. And now that moment is gone, so that no longer exists. This moment right now exists. When I finished this podcast doesn't exist. When I started this podcast no longer exists. There's only the right now that I'm talking to you and you are listening. Blows my mind to think about that. And when we recall all the events of our past, not only does our memory not allow us to remember every detail of an event from yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, it would be impossible for us to remember every detail. But also, at the moment that the event happened, we do not have all of the information of the event. We only have the information that we can gather based on our senses and the knowledge that we have at the time and how we would perceive that event occurring. And then we created a memory of that event and started recalling it over and over again to the mind to create remembering. So when we create a memory, our brain uses what information it thinks that it knows at the time to fill in the gaps of what it is experiencing through the senses that we have. And then when we recall that picture of that event to our mind, we do the same thing. We fill in the gaps with the experiences, the knowledge that we have while we're recalling it, which is more information than we had when we were actually experiencing it. And then we have to make that story fit into that paradigm. So when we talk about our past, we have to make it up. And a lot of us become very uncomfortable with looking at how much of the story of our past is actually places where our brain filled in the blanks with very limited information. But we don't need to be ashamed of this. And we don't actually need to fear it because everyone's doing it. This is just part of being human. This is part of the beauty of our experience as a human because there's also so much power there. If you recognize that your future, your past, is only in your mind. It is your property. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I want to bring up a quote here from a man named Dan Sullivan. When we talk about our future, your future is your property. It is only in your mind. You can make it whatever you want and then choose to believe it or not. Think about that. The same exists with our past. When we're recalling the past, it's only in our mind. And when we go to recall the memory of the past, we have certain facts about the present that we didn't have when the memory was first formed, and we use that to place on the story of the past. And then we have to fill in the blanks again to make it make sense with the reality that we're perceiving in the present moment with our current set of information, which is also limited. So the time that the memory was formed, it was formed with incomplete information that our brains filled in the blanks for. And then as we age and recall that memory, our brain has to revamp the story to fit our current paradigm of the world as we're recalling it then, and fill in the blanks again with more incomplete and limited information. Let me give you an example here that might help this put into perspective a little bit more. Okay, so let's look at like a generalized past. So in the past, say 500 AD, people believed that when someone had become sick with what we would now know as a virus or a bacteria, in the past, many people didn't know about viruses and bacteria. Actually, no one knew about them. At least, not that we know of. Maybe someone had a vague concept of it and they didn't speak about it. It was never recorded in history. But as far as we know, nobody in 500 AD knew about viruses and bacteria. So when someone became sick, a lot of people assumed that maybe they were possessed by an evil spirit or a ghost, maybe they were cursed, whatever system of beliefs that they chose at that time. Okay, so now, 2021, most of us adults who have a semi-higher education, we can look back at this 500 AD time as we read history books, as we imagine the past, and we can see how there were some flaws in the logic being used at 500 AD when it came to treating diseases as demon possession or a curse. And most of us with a higher education can arrive at where we see why they may have believed what they believed then, but we also understand how now we see things differently and treat diseases differently in 2021, since we now have the discovery of viruses and bacteria. And we understand now how we treat them with what we currently know about them, but that in 500 AD they didn't have that information. So we understand how that difference occurs, okay? And so we can make sense of the story of 500 AD and imagine it in one way, okay? And by the way that we currently treat viruses and bacteria, it's still evolving, so even that information is incomplete. And in 5,000 years, people will probably be scratching their head at our use of antibiotics here in 2021. But that's a digression. So we recognize how an adult would look at 500 AD in observing and telling the story of how people treated diseases in 500 AD. So now, let's consider this from the perspective of a child. A child who does not understand the intricacies of scientific research, how it has evolved over the last 2,021 years, and how older information from how scientific research was conducted 2,000 years ago could have led to these misunderstandings and beliefs. A child doesn't understand all of that. All they know as a child is that when they get sick, they tell their mom or their dad, or whoever's taking care of them, and then they maybe go to the doctor, and the doctor tells the mom and dad what's wrong, and then they go to a pharmacy, and they pick up a prescription, and then they go home, and the child takes it, and then the child feels better. That's what they know. So if you told them that a long time ago, if they had had this same sickness, you would have had to lock them in a room, and someone would throw holy water on them, or maybe tie them to a post and whip them, trying to bleed the demon out of them, or that they would be locked in a dungeon, or maybe cast out into the desert to wander and die. If you told them that in 500 AD, this is how people treated the same disease that your child has right now, your child may think, oh my God, they were crazy, or mean, or barbaric. And even as adults, we can maybe kind of think that, but we also understand how they came to these conclusions if we look at it logically with the information that they had then. But because of the child's current information that they're working with to make sense of sickness and how it's treated, and they don't know about 500 AD and scientific research and all that, how they imagine the past, their picture of the past, would be very different than how a 35-year-old is going to look at 500 AD and how they treated diseases, because the sets of information that these two humans have are completely different, but they're looking at the same past story. So the same principle applies to the past that we have actually, quote-unquote, lived within our own lifetime. A 15-year-old remembering themselves at age 5 will remember something completely different than they will remember from the age of 30 looking back at that same story of themselves at the age of 5. And this is because the information that they will be using at the age of 30 to fill in the gaps of the story will be totally different than the information they used at the age of 15. And because time has elapsed and allowed the information that was perceived at the time of the age of 5 to be a little bit less rehearsed, recalled a little bit less frequently. Therefore, our brain has left even more gaps in the story to fill in the blanks with current information when we recall the story. So the point of this example is this. When we look at our past as remembering, we have to be aware of the fact that, in fact, it is merely a story. That we are using information that we have now to make sense of that story so we can make it fit into our current story and paradigm of the world. So in fact, we are using our imagination quite vividly when we are remembering stories from our past. But we treat it quite differently than imagination. And we see it as being far more factual than when we use that same imagination to think about the future. We choose to feel far less confident when we use our imagination to think about the future. We may even feel like we're not allowed to be as confident about using our imagination when we think about the future. Think about that. Like, we don't allow ourselves to be as confident in our imagination when we think about the future. We think it's like some unseen rule that we're just not allowed to be that confident in it. I know a lot of my clients and myself struggled with giving ourselves permission to use that same level of confidence, that level of belief that we have in the stories of creating our future that we do with our stories from the past. That was like a real set of work to do there. To recognize I get to choose whether or not I feel confident in that story, and I get to make it up anyways. Why is it, do you think, that we do this? So I have a couple of ideas that I want to throw out. Number one is that our brain tells us that we're lacking evidence. When we make sense of our past, we use our imagination to fill in the gaps of the story to make it make sense with how we see the world now. And our brain wants us to be secure with that story so that we can go about feeling certain about the actions that we're taking now. Because remember, the primitive brain wants to give you certainty because your primitive brain thinks this means safety and therefore you will stay alive. So our primitive brain wants us to look at the past as something that has already happened, that it's just factual, that we can rely on that to create facts to live from now because it feels more certain to our primitive brain because the primitive brain just wants you to stay alive. Okay, so we feel comfortable with proving the story is true of our past. And when we keep living from them as if they're facts, what we end up doing is creating more evidence for ourselves that our past story is true. Because what our brain looks for, it will find. That's how our brains work. What it's looking for, it's going to find. This is also confirmation bias in scientific research. It's one of the biggest struggles for humanity to overcome when it comes to scientific research is accounting for this type of bias. This confirmation bias. That what you are looking for, you will eventually find. So we feel very comfortable in proving those stories of our past to be true, and therefore we recreate those things in our present with how we act from them as if they're facts. So we create more evidence for ourselves. And we have these things that we see as happening to us in our past that we want to see as those were dangerous, and therefore we want to avoid them. And so we live from those facts. So I want you to think about a story here. Say you're 4 years old and a man hits you in the face. So I'm going to imagine a man slaps me in the face at the age of 4. If I make that mean that all men will hit me in the face, then I will try to start proving that story to be true. Because maybe at the age of 4, I don't understand why this man hit me in the face. Maybe there was actually a bee on my face and I wasn't aware of it and he was trying to get the bee off of my face. Or something was on my face and he was and so I perceived this as him slapping me. Or there could be a million reasons. Maybe I was choking and I didn't realize, so many different things at the age of 4, parts of the story that I would not possibly understand. But if I make it mean, all men will hit me in the face, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start avoiding men because I believe all men will hit me in the face. And so if I avoid men, then I will go about my life trying to avoid men, which means that the only men that I will probably encounter are very aggressive men who will not accept the fact that I'm avoiding them. And these men are more likely to hit me, wouldn't they be? So then I would end up proving my own story true. So think about that. What really proves my past story to be true or untrue is in the brain. It's a few things. It has to do with intention, curiosity, and experience, along with many other things. But these 3 things are really huge in forming our quote-unquote reality facts about our past. And so if I go about my present moment with the intention of believing that all men are going to hit me, I'm not going to be curious about men. I'm going to want to stay away from them. I'm going to want to avoid them. And therefore my experience with men will be so limited, and the very few men that I probably will encounter would be men more likely to hit me. And so therefore I will continue to prove my story of the past true, that all men will hit me. But I will at the same time have such a limited experience of men and what men are really like? Because most of us know that have experienced a lot of men in life that there are actually not so many men in this world that are just going to slap you in the face. You know what I'm saying? So we have to remember that there are that basically we form our story of the past based on experience and perception, and we will live from that experience and perception based on our intention, curiosity, and that experience, and many other different factors. And we also have to keep in mind there are 8 billion other people on this planet that are having experiences with men, if we're using the same story. And none of them are wrong, and none of them are right. Because each of these 8 billion experiences is a mixture of this person's intention, curiosity, experience, and the knowledge that they had, the information that they had at the time that they experienced it, and therefore what they will try and prove true about that story as they live their life. So the key here is to recognize this. Your past is not as factual as your primitive brain is trying to convince you to view it as. Your primitive brain wants you to view it as factually for many reasons. And many of these reasons do serve us, but one way in which it does not serve us is that it asks us to not look at the future with the same certainty, that we don't have that right, that we don't have that ability. Even though logically the brain knows in the background that it's making up just as much of both stories. It doesn't want us to look at the future with the same amount of certainty because it wants to feel secure and safe. And it thinks by focusing on the past that it does that. Okay? So another reason why that I believe that we feel uncomfortable with looking at our future with the same amount of certainty is that a lot of us, and this is why I do self-image coaching, our self-image is too flexible. We haven't defined it for ourselves. We allow other people to define it for us and redefine it for us constantly, so we're constantly changing our view of who we are. We're unwilling to believe for ourselves with certainty who we are, and then just make that belief make sense with what is happening in our life. No, we constantly allow other people to tell us who we are and change our minds about it and second guess ourselves and doubt our goodness, doubt our amazingness, doubt our abilities. And in order for a person to remember their future as if it was fact, a person really needs to be willing to know who they are and not allow other people's opinions to persuade them to change that image of themselves constantly. And that they're the only ones, they need to recognize that they're the only ones who gets to decide that in the end. Even if you allow another person to convince you to change your self-image, you're the one who decides that in the end. So recognizing that power and then choosing to solidify your self-image in a way that serves you. And this deals with our people-pleasing nature here. Because I see so many people change their beliefs about themselves in a moment where they feel like they're unable to make everyone else around them happy or to like them. And so they allow this perception of the other person's perception of them to constantly change who they believe that they are. And so this makes it almost impossible to live from a future image of yourself because your current image of yourself is constantly changing and being redefined by what you think is the people around you, but it's actually you redefining it. Okay, so reason number 3 why I think it's so hard for us to be confident in looking at our future the same way we look at our past is that we're not practiced in doing this. And in fact, we're almost taught that it's dangerous or irresponsible or maybe even crazy. We're taught in so many ways to defend our past story and to use our memory of the past to protect us from making future mistakes. We're also taught to consistently believe that the future is uncertain. So when we imagine the future, we do it with such great uncertainty that the first sign of resistance to that image that we're looking at of our future, we think something has gone terribly wrong, abandon, and that future image just crumbles. We let it go. We're not taught to look at our past with that same amount of uncertainty and questioning, and to recognize the flaws in the story of our past that we are telling ourselves about our past that cause us to make certain decisions in our present moment that will keep us in a perpetual state of recreating the past over and over again in different ways. We're not taught to look at that. We are not taught how it is possible for us to do this in reverse. And so this practice feels crazy to us. It seems uncomfortable. It seems a bit scary. Because your primitive brain, remember, it desires certainty and safety, and we're taught to seek that certainty and safety in looking at our past. So, what does this have to do with imagining our past and remembering our future? You might be asking that. It's really all about the confidence and the certainty of the story that we're telling ourselves, and about using one story to serve the other. You see, once we recognize that we're taking liberties constantly with our story of our past anyways, that we are making up most of it anyways, and it is evolving and constantly changing anyways as we gain more information and our paradigm of the world changes slowly, here's what we can do. We can change it to serve us in creating evidence to prove our future story to be true right now, instead of using our story of the past as evidence of what we are allowed to believe about our future and how limited we are allowed to be with believing things about our future. Then we can use the same confidence of rehearsing our stories of our past. We can use that same confidence to create and rehearse the stories of our future that we will recall to mind and hold in mind with that same fierceness. Hold on to it as a memory. This is what remembering our future is about. And I'm going to go deeper on that here in a minute, but before I do, I want to address a concern that I know is going to come up here because it does with most of the people that I talk to about this. So I want to just go ahead and address it here. I'm not saying that we have to undo every story of our past just to create some off-the-wall, nonsensical story that you won't actually believe. No, that's not what I'm saying here. This is a practice that I take my clients through of seeing our stories from the past and seeing where they have certainty about what happened, and that therefore we make it mean what it has to mean, and showing them where there is space to question that story and redefine the image in a way that it serves us. So it's not taking apart the entire story, but it's going through the story and really questioning the details of it. How do I know that's true? How do I know that's true? And is that factual? Or did I make a part of that up? Did I assume something there? And if I assume something there, there's wiggle room. I could make it mean something else. What else could I believe happened here? And can I make this story mean something instead that serves me right now in creating current movement and action that will serve my future memory? Because the way that they're looking at their past right now is they're looking at it as if they have to believe something about it, and therefore they will keep creating the same actions over again. And their past story is what they're looking at when they're creating actions right now. So what I want to offer is this. Our present actions are what creates the future that we are living into as the present when it becomes the present. Let me say that again. The actions that we take presently are what creates the future that will be the present when it becomes the present. The future doesn't actually exist because when it gets here, it's the present. The past doesn't exist anymore because all we're in is the present. All it is now is a story you're telling yourself in your head. And that's not to say you're crazy, we're all doing it. That's just how it exists as being a human. So the actions you are taking right now are really the only important actions because in reality they are the only actions that you take. They're the only actions that ever really exist are the ones you're taking right now. Past actions are only a story now. Future actions are only a story for now. They only exist in our mind. So if the actions we are taking right now will come from our feelings and how we interpret those feelings, and if our feelings come from our thoughts about the current circumstance, and those thoughts come from our beliefs about what is possible, what we believe is possible comes from the story we're telling ourselves about the past and the future, then why are we not leveraging that in a way that serves us to create the life that we want to be living in instead of limiting the life that we are quote unquote allowed to be living in? And here is what I mean by that. Here is what imagining our past to remember our future comes in. Here's where it comes in. If I look at a future with imagination and uncertainty, then the moment that I face an obstacle, my actions will shift to defensive, to playing it safe, to retreating because I will believe something has gone wrong. And my primitive brain will kick in and say, oh, yep, now we got to play it. See, I told you so. I told you this was a bad idea. I told you it was stupid to try something new and uncertain. You should give up now, go back to the cave where it's safe. That way I don't die, right? Because that's what the primitive brain is telling you. If you don't go back to the cave right now and retreat, you're probably going to die. And logically, we know this isn't true, but this is literally what the primitive brain is telling you, and we believe it. We don't want to look at the fact that that's what we're believing, but that's the reality. We're believing that our brain is telling us we're going to die if we don't go back to the cave and hide. So what if I believe in a future vision of myself as if it's just factual, as if it already happened? As if I've created this image in my mind and I recall it to my mind over and over and over so many times and rehearse it in my head so many times that it's as if it already happened. It's a picture in my head of the future as it's already happened. If I look at that future image of myself and see myself as the successful businessman, as the thought leader, as the coach that helps millions of lives to end their suffering and start living this fulfilled and authentic life that I know we're all here to live. If I see that image of myself and I've rehearsed it so many times in my head and it's just a fact for me. If I know that this future is inevitable because it's a memory that I have, because I'm remembering that future, then guess what? When I take an action, the result doesn't matter. It does not matter. Because I'm taking action knowing that that future is inevitable. So here's what happens. I will continue to always take action as if I know this. And I will keep creating more vibration, more energy in my life towards that future image because that future image to me is inevitable. So whatever happens with my actions, it doesn't matter. That wasn't the point anyways. I wasn't taking that action for the result that I was going to get to that action. I'm taking that action because I already know what's going to happen. I already know my future because I'm remembering it right now. I'm remembering what I'm here for. And so if I put out something and, my brain's going to want to create like this is going to be the result. And if the result is different from that, then guess what? I just see that as part of the process. I will always be solution oriented. The obstacle will just be, I will look at it with the curiosity of, okay, so here's the obstacle. So if this is what happens in the end, how did I get around this obstacle to get there? Do you hear the question there? How did I get around this obstacle to get there? Not how will I? How did I do it? If that future image of me is inevitable, if I'm living from that space, then I get to ask myself, in the future, how did I do it, Seth? How did I do it? And this is a practice I take my clients through, is talking to themselves from their future. And also talking to their past selves from their present, because that kind of helps get them into the mindset of talking to themselves from the future. And I know this might sound crazy, but my friends, I promise you, it is the most powerful thing you can do. So the thing is, when I am looking at this future image as if it is inevitable, I will always find a solution to every obstacle. Obstacles don't become failure. Obstacles don't become an indicator to give up. They become a curiosity for me. Because that future image is inevitable to me, right? So I will always choose to be solution-oriented. It's not being oblivious. I know that it's an obstacle. I know that it's hard. I know that it's difficult and scary. I'm still experiencing all of that. But because I already know that that future image is inevitable. Okay, so Seth, I'm scared right now. This looks scary. I'm not sure how I get around this. But I know I do, so how did I do it? And my brain will go to work, finding a solution. When you ask your brain a question, here's what's so amazing about the brain. If you ask your brain a question, it cannot not answer it. So if I ask myself, how did I get around this? My brain goes to work finding a solution. Because what it's looking for, it will always find. If I put out a program for my coaching clients and no one wants it, that's okay. Because apparently, that's not the program that got me to reaching 1 million lives. So which one did? So I'll do another one. And that one doesn't sell. No one wants it. So I do it again because that wasn't it. That wasn't the one. That wasn't the one that gets me there. That got me there. Because inevitably I know I get there. So it's just a matter of time until I create the one that did get me there. So I'm going to keep putting them out because it doesn't matter that people don't like them. It doesn't matter that nobody takes them, because here's the thing, in the process, every time I put out a program and no one takes it, I become that much better at creating programs and finding more solutions, finding more intricacies in how people look at the programs. And inevitably, I will always find solutions because I know the inevitable end. And every time I put out a new program, it will be better and better and better because I will have more information every time I do it. And every time it doesn't reach the amount of people that I thought it would, it's not failure. This is just part of the process. And 100 million times later, I will finally remember the program, the one that I made that reached 1 million people. But the entire time, I was just putting that content together. I was learning how I did it. Not how I will do it. I was honing my skills as a coach and learning how I did that. So how does imagining our past play into this? Well, if you recognize that your past is simply a story that you're telling yourself about incomplete pieces of information that your brain wants to make sense of to fit your current paradigm, if my future image is just set and remembered with certainty, then my current paradigm of the world that I am living in is that future. So I will go to the stories of my past, and I will recall them, and I will imagine them, and my brain will go to work filling in the blanks of those stories and details in a way to make them make sense of why I'm here now, living into that future that is inevitable. Not causing me to doubt my abilities of the future. Instead, those stories will push me towards that future image because I know it's inevitable. And so now my past stories support that image. I want to give you an example. And my friends, I've told you this before. I love my family. And my family and I, we struggled growing up. Me and my relationship with my family was a hard relationship. And at the time, when I was going through that relationship, I made it mean so many negative things. I'm so far behind. I don't have the advantages other people have. I don't have the same opportunities because my family's holding me back. My family is mean. Why did I have this family? Blah, 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 blah. All of these stories. And as I went into my adulthood, I relived that story over and over again about how the way my family handled my childhood set me so far back behind everybody else. When my parents kicked me out of the house at the age of 19, they screwed me over. And I told that story to myself over and over again and believed I was behind everybody else. And so you know what I did? I took action as if I was constantly behind everybody else, which meant, you know what I created? That I was constantly behind everybody else and playing catch up. Once I realized that I was making most of this up anyways because I didn't know every little detail about why my parents did what they did. And I recognize this as an adult now because as I talk to my mom and my dad about why they did what they did, and they tell me the logic they were using at the time and what they remember, it's like, wow. My vision of my parents then was so different than how I see them now. And so, of course, now it makes sense what they did. Did I like it then? No. But now, guys, I've turned this story around in a way, and it's not, to me, it's so true. For the longest time, I believed that I had been cheated until I chose to believe that this entire time I was here to become this empowered, loving, purposeful being. This man that is so full of love and passion and compassion and insight. And here, because I want to help people heal their wounds that they've been carrying around as if they have no choice in carrying them. And because I believe that that's what I'm here for. When I look at my past image now, do you know what I see about my parents? I see that my parents did something unprecedented. My parents gave me a very powerful gift. My parents gave me the opportunity to figure this life out. My parents gave me every obstacle to overcome so that when I was an adult and I would be going to the world as a thought leader and trying to bring new ideas into the world that nobody has thought before, new ideas that people are going to be like, that is crazy. My parents prepared me for that They prepared me for that. Every day when they went against everything that I wanted to believe, they prepared me to be the man that I am right now. My parents gave me the biggest head start into my adulthood than I don't even think that they realize. And that story causes me to show up so completely different than I did 10 years ago when I was feeling sorry for myself and telling myself that I was behind because my parents didn't give me the same opportunities. My parents didn't coddle me like other kids. My parents didn't let me watch the movies and listen to the music that other kids did. My parents didn't pay for my college like other parents paid for their kids' college. When I told that story, I felt so disempowered, and so I took disempowered actions. But when I see now that what my parents did was give me the biggest effing gift, because when I went through college, I did that for myself. I figured it out. My parents, whether they realized it or not, let go and chose to believe I will figure it out. In spite of the risk of them possibly being seen as horrible parents by me or by anyone who heard my story of self-pity and how horrible they were as parents, they let that go. They did something so powerful for me there. Instead of holding on and fighting me, they said, you know what? Go then. And I did. And they allowed me to go through my struggle of hating them, of seeing them as horrible people and being bitter about them. They had to just let that happen. And I know it wasn't easy for them. They struggled. It hurt my mom's heart, my dad's heart every day. But they let it happen. And whether they realized it or not, that was a huge, huge gift. Because this prepared me for taking the hard actions I was going to have to take as an adult to be who I know I am. And see people react to it in a way that I don't necessarily like, that's hard, that's difficult, to hear people say things about me that hurt a little bit. But to choose to know who I am anyways and to do it anyways. My parents were the biggest role models in that for me. And I never, until now, was able to thank them for it. Now that I see who I am and where I'm going, what I'm doing with my life, I am able to thank them for all of that. All of the stuff that I used to hate them for, I can say, thank you. So I have become unstoppable because I changed my story of my past. I imagined it in a way that allows me to remember the future that I'm here to live. And guess what? Because of that, I find evidence for that all of the time. Every time I revisit a story from the past, I find evidence to support that new future image that I have of myself, to support the new paradigm that I'm living in right now. And so when I tell my past stories to myself now and I look at how I used to tell them in the past, it's like amazing to me how I'm able to find gifts where I found curses before, how I'm able to find thank yous where I gave FUs before. It's a powerful space. Because I recognize I can either create or I can disintegrate. There's no staying the same. So I choose to imagine my past to support the future that I am now remembering that I am here to live. One in which I create so much abundance, so much love, so much possibility, so much connectedness in the world around me. You have so much choice in how you want to tell that story, my friends, for you. So imagine that past story in such a powerful way that causes you to remember the future that you know you are here to be living into. Not the one you feel like you have to because of what other people have told you, or because of how you've limited yourself because of the past limiting story that you've been telling yourself about who you have to believe you are. That beautiful, powerful image of yourself in the future, that's your reality. Live from that space. The only moment or action that exists is the one that you are taking right now. The rest is simply a story that you hold in your mind. It's your story of your past, your story of your future, and what you choose to believe about who you are now. These stories are the biggest forces in creating your present actions. And what is so amazing about recognizing that, my friends, is that you are the one that creates all of those things. Nothing outside of you creates that for you. Maybe you've been allowing yourself to believe that things outside of you create that for you. And therefore, you choose to see it that things outside of you create that for you. But guess what, my friends? You are choosing to delegate that power to something outside of you. You're still the one making the choice. It's all in how you're seeing it here. And once we learn this, then in any moment of now, we will always be able to choose actions that serve us to be more of that person that we remember that we are here to be, that we remember in that future. Imagine your past to remember your future. So you take actions now that got you there, not that get you there, so that you will take the actions now that got you there. I tell myself all the time when I look at my future image, wow, Seth, look at you. How did I get there? How did I do that? How did I do that? And I answer myself all of the time. And I take actions from those answers. And my friends, that just changes everything. That is the most powerful space to live from, my friends. The most powerful space. If you don't believe me, just try it. When you're ready to live from that space and dive in deeper on that, try it. And I'm here to guide you through it. It's some powerful work, my friends. It's scary. I'm not trying to say it's not scary to let go of that paradigm of the past and the future and the present, and let go of that illusion of time, and to look at your future with as much certainty as you look at your past, and then create your past story. Imagine it in a way that supports that future. It's scary. I know it is. I'm not trying to tell you that it's easy, but it is where all of your power is, my friend. So when you're ready to do that work, I'm here. I'm here to take your hand and walk you through it step by step by step. I'm not going to let you go back either. You won't want to go back once you start, but I'm not going to let you. So when you're ready, I'm here to guide you. Start imagining your past to remember your future, to take action now. Take the action now that got you to that future. I love you all, my friends. You all can do this. You have so much more power than you can ever imagine. So much more. We're only beginning to find it out. All right. That's all I have for you this week. I'll talk to you all again next week. Until then, ciao. Hey, thank you for listening in this week. I hope you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you did, please subscribe or follow this podcast to receive the newest episodes every week as I bring them to you here on the Connect Your Health to Life coaching channel. Ratings, reviews, and comments are always appreciated. These allow me to know more of what my listeners would like in the podcast and allow for more people who may be searching for a podcast just like this one to find the Connect Your Health to Life coaching channel. If you would like more information about me and the work that I do with my clients one-on-one, then please visit my website at www.slch.ch. Again, that is www.slch.ch. You can also find me on social media on Instagram at SethLusk_coaching. Again, that is SethLusk_coaching. And on Facebook in my free Facebook group community called A Healthy Life Connection. We would love to have you in the group, and it's only 3 membership questions that you have to answer to join. And again, it's entirely free. And if you need any further information or just want to say hello, feel free to send me an email directly at slusk.health@slch.ch. Again, that is slusk.health@slch.ch. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to our next time together. Ciao.